Today I'm recording a video to tell you about one of our wire rope product lines. We call it threaded plugs and threaded studs. The threaded plugs are really just smaller threaded studs. They're a little bit smaller in diameter, thread size. They're typically going on a smaller wire rope diameter. So let me get right into it. I want to show you some examples of fittings, loose, and then I'll show you some examples of those same fittings swaged onto the wire rope. So first off, in the threaded plugs, let's start off with a 1/4 inch diameter fitting. This is a 1/4 inch threaded plug, and it's got 1/4 thread. And this model will go on a 1/8 wire rope. The 1/4 inch size could also be used on 3/32 cable. We would just drill a different cable ID. One thing you'll hear me spouting about. For example, a 1/4 inch threaded plug could also be about the length of a 1/4. This model was for a light duty application where just a small amount of holding strength was needed for a light application and only a small amount of thread length was needed because it was bottoming out in a tapped hole. So let's step up in size, both in terms of thread size and wire rope diameter size. So that brings us to 5/16. This is a 5/16 threaded plug. It's going to be difficult to see, but this one has a yellow zinc plating finish. And most of the time the carbon steel model will have a clear zinc plated finish. And this model with 5/16 thread could either be installed on 3/32 or 1/8 cable, your choice. But you have to let us know so we can provide the right blind hole ID. Here's a 5/16 threaded plug. You'll see it's much longer in the thread length. This was for a 2.8 inch thread length requirement, and only about 1 inch area here with maybe a 5/8 blind hole. And this one also went on a 1/8 cable diameter. Very, very common cable diameter. Those are threaded plugs. They're usually used on small diameter wire rope, aka aircraft cable, typically starting around 1/32 cable diameter. And then once you get up to about 1/4 inch cable diameter, you probably have a higher holding strength requirement, and you're going to want to step up the threaded plug in holding strength too. So that's why it would make sense to start to browse the threaded stud category. Now sometimes though, you do have applications where you don't need full holding strength. So this particular example is a threaded plug with a 3/8 thread diameter, and the customer wanted it installed on a 1/4 inch cable. And this was for an architectural application where the assembly needed to be taut, but the fitting did not need to hold all the way to break strength. And this was a custom for a special architectural feature. Actually, it was for a vertical cable railing facade on a building in California. That one I was just holding up was coarse thread and UNC thread, and we also do threaded studs in fine thread. Here's 2 examples. Well, let's take them one at a time. This one has a cotter hole, and once in a while there'll be an application where you want to put a cotter pin or seizing wire at the end to prevent the fasteners from shaking loose, usually because it is a very dynamic load, could be a lot of vibration, it could be critical, safety could be a feature, and that might come up. And in this fine thread stud, it has a wrench flat like the one we talked about, but it has one other feature. It has a taper, and that taper is sometimes we refer to it as a lifeline taper. Why do we do that? Because of a lifeline threaded stud. A lifeline threaded stud was originally used for a lifeline cable on a sailboat cable railing. So it would prevent you from falling over, aka lifeline. And this model has a taper. So it's going to be a smooth transition from the stock diameter down to the thread major. And this is very popular for cable railings to have that taper. That's what we mean by a Lifeline threaded stud. So let's show you just a couple more examples of threaded studs before we move to the assemblies. Here's a threaded stud with 6 inches of thread length, 12 inches of overall length. Per customer specification, they wanted that feature to mimic a tie rod, but they needed more flexibility, and that's where the wire rope came in handy for improved performance. One last threaded stud is this Mamma Jamma. It's a 1 1/4 inch stock diameter turned down to a 1 inch fine thread, and it was installed on a 1/2 inch wire rope. One product line in this category is mil spec, MS 21259 and MS 21260. And these are typically used for aerospace and defense applications where that kind of critical application is paramount, maybe a mission critical assembly. And they have a wrench flat and inspection hole, and they're made to a specific standard manufactured by QPL Source. These threaded plugs and threaded studs, they're installed at the end of the cable, the wire rope. They're designed to be machine swaged. That means that we use tool and die on hydraulic presses in our shop in a controlled environment with quality controls to swage it to the wire rope to get the optimal performance and consistency. And that's what we specialize in, is assembly fabrication. This model I showed you uninstalled, and you'll see that it is elongated. That is from the compression from the swaging process. And by swaging, I just mean machine crimping with tool and die. And this example was swaged onto a 1x19 stainless steel strand for an architectural application. Here's that 1/2 inch wire rope assembly, and you can really see where it was compressed down to meet the holding strength of that 1/2 inch wire rope. Here's an example of a mil spec MS 21259 installed on a 7x19 galvanized aircraft cable. And this again was for the mil spec application. One example of a threaded stud is a threaded stud that has been hex swaged. So we did not install a wrench flat, instead we hex swaged it. So it started out as a round stock diameter, and then after compression it left a hex profile, which you can hold with a wrench in order to do torquing of your nuts in the adjustable section. And this example was on a 1x7 galvanized extra high strength strand for a barrier application. Here's just a general purpose threaded stud that was installed on a 3/8/719 galvanized aircraft cable. Extra long thread length, extra long overall length. Here's an example of the threaded plug. And in this example, you'll see it was hex swaged. Hex swaging is highly common in the threaded plug space. And this example was made out of a 7/16 stock diameter, and it was hex swaged to a 3/8 hex. And it has 7/16 UNC thread on it. And it's installed on a 3/16 7x19 stainless steel cable. So those are the examples that I prepared for you today, and I want to encourage you to contact us because we really want to hear from you. If you're having trouble with your assembly, if you're designing a new assembly, if you have an assembly that you just need to have quoted, if you're a purchasing buyer, if you're an engineer, please reach out to us. We're always here, and we love talking wire rope assemblies. You can contact me, David, at lexcocable.com. We'll leave that for you at the end. You can call me, 800-626-6556, extension 316. And we also have prepared a special form for you where you can just go ahead and fill in the critical characteristics you're looking for, like the wire rope size, the thread size, and the length. And then we'll take that information and then we will email you back with some options and start a dialogue. And that's really what we do best, is we help our customer who has, maybe they know exactly what they want, somewhere between that and knowing vaguely what they want, and then we turn that into a bill of materials that we manufacture to their specification in a very compressed lead time. That's where we shine.